Back in 2021, a Georgia-based indie folk artist released a spectacular debut EP called Emerald City. Glowing with dreamy chords and soothing vocals, Emerald City captured the hearts of listeners who wanted to make sense of the transition from their teenage years to adulthood. That Georgia-based artist was Mary Margaret Cozart. Since Emerald City, Mary Margaret has played local shows and expanded her indie folk sound to incorporate elements of rock music. Dropping singles like Interior Design and more recently Maggie's World, Mary Margaret has evolved into a profound and dynamic artist in today's age. In our conversation, we unpack her musical journey from the early days in Atlanta to her musical training at the University of Georgia and new music. We even get exclusive details about her upcoming full-length album. Mary Margaret is an incredibly kind and sincere soul, and it was an absolute pleasure speaking with her. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the If Ever You're Listening podcast. I'm your host, Stanley C. And today we have an incredibly talented guest, indie folk rock singer, songwriter, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, Mary Margaret Cozart. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start from the beginning. There's a lot of great music that has come since the 2020s, but I'm curious how we even got here. So take me back to what was Mary like as a kid, and how did music enter your life? What role did it play?
Sure. Yeah. I also go by Mary Margaret. But my musical journey started kind of as a kid, like a lot of musicians, um, just listening in car rides to albums, radio, and I think I've always had just a pull to melody. And so I would bang around on my family's piano as a kid. And my parents enrolled me in some piano lessons, and I did that for the majority of my early childhood. And then I transferred into an interest in guitar when I was about 12. And I took a few lessons, but nothing ever really stood out to me from my instruction there. And so I kind of took to just self-teaching from YouTube. And that's kind of when I started writing songs as well. I would learn chords and use them in songs to kind of practice getting them under my fingers. And so my songwriting and guitar playing kind of developed in a parallel way throughout my early teenage years. And I also took some guitar classes when I was in high school. That was another kind of chapter, and that propelled me to um, lean into a lot of classical technique that we were getting from those classes. And I auditioned for a guitar minor at the University of Georgia, which is where I went to college. And so that kind of was the foundation for all of my music before I released anything.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to stay in this period for a bit. Tell me more about what type of songs are you writing in high school? Both, embarrassing, not embarrassing, kind of maybe just thematically, what are you writing? And how does that transition go into college?
Sure. Yeah. I wrote a lot of, just whimsical things. I think my first song was called Dreams. You know, very, very basic, like generic ideas. Um, I think I was inspired a lot by spirituality when I was a teenager because I was in Catholic school, which is an interesting thing we could go talk about for a while too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have grown up from a Catholic background, and so that kind of was being uh that was definitely the surrounding environment of um like narratives that I was receiving from school. And so kind of spirituality thinking of God. That kind of directed my songwriting as an early teenager. Um, yeah, I don't know, just kind of whimsical, like I said.
Fantastic. For we could I'm gonna maybe do a side tangent to the Catholic school, but before I get to that, I want to talk about you're trained at the University of Georgia with the minor. Um, Tell me more about the training that you got at that period. How did that influence kind of your idea of song making? And is there any kind of echoes of that in your current music?
Sure. Yeah. Um, I am really grateful that I was going through that program because I learned a lot about um, just really honing in technique with tone and um, finger style playing. And my first guitar lesson for that minor was how to shape your nails to
Mhm.
play a classical guitar. And while I don't necessarily play classical guitar now, I still actually kind of like to keep my nails filed a certain way because it's easier to finger pick, and I do play with my fingers often instead of a pick. Um, but just small things like that that sometimes you don't really think about, I guess, if you're playing a rock song on guitar, you know. But definitely scales and learning um, some warm-up techniques, like all of these things that kind of go behind the scenes. Um, I picked up, and yeah, I would practice this little routine every day on guitar that went through um, the first four frets. You put your finger on like your pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky on the first four frets, and then you just work your way down each string and then back up, and you're doing little trills with your right hand. And yeah, just really kind of focusing on those small skills has definitely opened up more for what I can do on guitar. And I think that still shows in my songwriting today, even though it is a little bit less complicated.
Mhm.
Um, I think for a while I challenged myself to incorporate all the technique I was learning into my songs. Um, but I think sometimes it was maybe pushing it too much and it was losing a bit of the humanity of a song's feeling. So,
That's so fascinating. Okay. I want to get to Emerald City EP
mhm.
and the making of this. Love this project. It's 5 songs, coming of age. From what I read, it's a passion project, and it was birthed out of the pandemic. But talk to me, and there was a lot of great collaboration. So talk to me about the making of this project. Kind of what was the motivation to start this solo EP, and how do you look back on it now?
Yeah. So when I was at the University of Georgia going through that guitar minor, I was in the music school, and I actually did perform with a folk duo with one of my best friends, Liz Farrell. And so we were writing songs together, kind of playing together out in Athens, and we recorded an EP of 3 songs. And that was kind of like the bug. I just knew that I wanted to be able to record music that I had written on my own, in addition to what we had already worked on together. Um, and yeah, so going through the Athens scene, I had met a lot of different musicians, and also being involved in the music business program at UGA, I was introduced to David Barbie, who is kind of like a hometown hero of Athens, and he has um, he has a lot of influence in bringing people together. And so he, as a professor, connected me with a few folks to record at his studio when I reached out of interest. Um, and so I started working with his son, Henry, and a few other musicians, Ben Hackett and Gary Eddy, and we recorded. We spent a few times practicing before we went into a live session at the studio. Um, and yeah, that was a really interesting time because it was right after COVID. So we had all been kind of pent up, and I was a student still. And so kind of getting to explore the music scene with musicians who were um, older and had been in the Athens music scene for a while. Um, it was cool to be able to learn from them and kind of lean on their experience in the studio, and bring them out of, I guess, the kind of touring hibernation that they were experiencing because they had been um, on the road with a lot of different bands at that point.
Fantastic. And talk to me about the theme of Emerald City. When I first, I was like, okay, Wizard of Oz, but I was like, maybe she's talking about like Seattle or
Mhm.
another city.
Mhm.
But and thematically, a lot of these songs are coming of age songs. They're beautiful, they're dreamy, going back to dreams. But there's a lot of harsh realities in the actual words and the songwriting and the stories you're telling. And this dissonance I'm noticing in your music, I see it pop up even outside of that project. So talk to me a little bit more about how you see dissonance in songwriting or in song crafting. Do you do it intentionally, or do you see it more as like a natural progression on how you come to make songs?
Yeah, I'll start with that little question first. I think it does kind of come up naturally. A lot of my songwriting is really just personal reflection, honestly. And um, going back to your question about earlier, what did I write about as a teenager? I think it was really just kind of my worldview and how I was interpreting things around me. And while that has changed since I was a teenager, I think it's still the same process where it doesn't always feel intentional that there's dissonance in my music. It's just kind of that's the way we have to live. There is a lot of awful stuff that's happening, especially right now. Um, and trying to find the beauty in all of it is what I think being an artist means. Um, so yeah, but to go back to Emerald City, um, I was studying human geography at the University of Georgia in addition to the music. So I was reading different articles, and I found a lot of inspiration from places as I have throughout my life, but the discipline of human geography felt like a really unique way to explore um, different facets of human life with the basis of place as the focus. Like, so instead of anthropology or sociology that have their kind of own lenses of looking at human life, geography, I love it because it's place-based.
Mm.
Um, so that kind of theme, I was applying to Emerald City, which, um, yes, it is also inspired from The Wizard of Oz. I was thinking of how Dorothy found Oz at the end of her story, and the rose-colored glasses fell apart, or the emerald curtain, whatever.
Mhm.
And I think just going through school, I was seeing the reality of life in different ways that I had not experienced as a child. And so, yeah, just coming of age, um, learning more about the world through human geography. I was comparing myself to Dorothy, I think, in that theme. And again, this little project came about during COVID. So we recorded in 2021, but the idea came to me when I was in school on online classes, and um, just feeling a, a grappling with a lot of questions of what am I doing right now? What does this mean for the future? Um, and also I had a extended relative pass away during that time, and so Home for Now came out of that situation, and I just felt like it was a universal but still a bit of a unique way to kind of capture love, loss, growth, new perspectives.
That's powerful. Grief, even.
Mhm.
When I when I was ranking my favorite Mary Margaret songs, Home for Now was in that
Oh,
trio. It's Home for Now, Georgia to California, and Desert Yard. Um, and Home for Now was, I think I like when you kind of just sing. You're not even singing like specific words, you're just singing, and the way that is at the tail end of Home for Now, tail end of Georgia to California, that there's so much emotion in your music. And I've even seen some people say soulfulness in your music that I would agree with, that really, really pops out during those moments. For your career after Emerald City, talk to me about how you're enjoying or not enjoying, however you're interpreting live shows. Um, I've watched some of your stuff online. I love the crowd reactions. Love it's actually like more upbeat than I thought it was gonna be, which is really cool. Going back to the dissonance and going into it seems like you're really enjoying yourself up there. So talk to me about how you're enjoying live shows, what touring is like for you, and what are some things that stand out for you?
Sure. Yeah, all great questions. Um, so I feel like Emerald City was honestly my entry into my solo endeavors. Performing is not something that I really did before I released that EP, at least on my own. I had performed with the duo, but yeah, I think Emerald City was kind of like the start that I wanted to introduce myself with. And I think a lot has changed since then because um, I feel I feel like I've grown so much as a performer, and you can really I think Emerald City is a great place that I started with, but I think my voice has changed, even just in the way that I sing now from the recordings captured in Emerald City. And um, yeah, I think just learning how to interact with a crowd is something that I've gained since releasing that. And that kind of shows in the two other songs that I've released since then, in Interior Design and Maggie's World. Um, I moved to Savannah after I graduated from Georgia, and entering into a new music scene and kind of beginning a life as an adult on my own there was a experience that also shaped a lot of the music that I'm writing now and performing. Um, and I have not toured really. I have not done that. That is on the to do, and I feel like I'm finally in a place where I can actually make that happen. Um, so yeah, more on that possibly, but um, I think yeah, Emerald City was just the beginning.
And talk to me about the music. You referenced interior design and Maggie's World. We could have a whole just Maggie's World conversation, but in terms of music you're making, it does sound different. It's more aggressive, but not like freaking Metallica aggressive, but just comparatively more aggressive. The atmosphericness, the dreaminess of Emerald City kind of goes back, and now it's more, because when I first was reading the description for your music, I was like, "There's not rock. This isn't rock. This is like folk or and like singer
Yeah.
song." But that's
Yeah.
because I wasn't listening to the newer stuff. You're 100% that too. Talk to me more about where those influences came from, and why you decided to shift your sound a little bit during the post Emerald City phase of your career.
Yeah, I think it may not have been an intentional decision and really just, again, kind of like a reflection of what I was going through in life. Um, I think because Emerald City came before I had started performing, I was still just in my own world, in my own head. Um, and since I've been able to get out and perform and just do things on my own in life, I think that the music that has come from the past few years is completely changed because of it. Um, so yeah, I think it probably sounds more aggressive because I've had to just gain more experience and grow thicker skin, you know? Um, but yeah, it's tough because I have this folk background and I do still kind of incorporate that into my music, but it is hard to define myself as a folk artist now. And so trying to marry the different eras
Mm.
of where I have been recognized and where I am now, that we're coming upon more music, but it's not quite ready yet. So it's an interesting in-between phase.
I could ask 10 questions about that one sentence, but we're gonna get there. That's very exciting. More music to come. Let's do a slight pivot. You're a creative. You write. Your songwriting is very descriptive, very colorful in the descriptive sense, not in the actual, you don't talk about colors all the time. But I sometimes will just read your lyrics because it's just really, really interesting. The stories you're kind of unpacking, and sometimes you're talking directly to an individual. But you're also a writer, and that's where I'm going towards. You have a Substack, MMC's News and Muses. Um, Highly recommend you guys go to it. It's fun. I read a few of your pieces on there about music you're listening to, muses you have, shows you'll be at, and talk to me about what motivated you to join Substack. How have you enjoyed it so far? And what are some of the things that you want to write or you have written on there?
Okay. Yeah, I came to Substack at the beginning of the year, like a lot of people, I think, who were feeling the frustration from social media and especially just the capitalist nonsense with Elon's X and um, the election, changing tides in media, and people, especially musicians, wanting to find a more direct route to connect with an audience instead of feeling like it could be taken away from you at any moment. The whole TikTok thing was going on, the potential ban. And suddenly everyone is freaking out about how am I going to build an audience where I don't even know if I have control over that audience. And so that kind of framework gave me a push, but I also have just been interested in Substack as a place um, to connect with different writing for a few years. And so I joined the bandwagon. Um, I was in a transition period at the beginning of this year. I moved back to Atlanta from Savannah, and I was looking for work and doing a lot of creative soul searching in the process. And so I had time to start this Substack journey, and it has been great. I enjoy taking time to write about um, musicians that are in the same kind of generation that I am, that are up and coming, and I take a lot of inspiration from just looking at peers and seeing what they're doing. And I think it's so easy to fall into an algorithm to find inspiration. And um, I'm still on social media, just like really curious what people are into. And so um, I think having a more intentional way of putting everything that I'm consuming into words instead of just letting it live in my brain. Um, that's what this Substack is kind of an outlet for. Music reviews for songs or albums that are coming out that are coming from musicians that I've followed for a while, and I just want to have a conversation about it almost. But it's also been a way to announce things that I've been working on as well. So I've given little snippets of demos and shared some show dates. Um, and yeah, I need to get back on that. That is something that has taken a back seat the past few months while I've been working on other stuff. But yes, it is a very inspiring community, I think. And I know you're also on Substack, which is great.
Love it. Love Substack. But if you're a fan of Mary Margaret and you do not know that she has a Substack, I hope and you watch this conversation, you definitely go in there because you're getting more. I actually really enjoyed it because I got to learn more about how you think about
Mm.
music because you're reviewing, you're a journalist, you're doing the thing, and it gave me another level of depth to understanding your music knowledge. Speaking of music and your music mind, you have more contemporary music, Maggie's World. Um,
Mm.
Talk to me about because world, that's kind of a location. So we're still in the
Yeah.
geography, and I want to talk more about geography when I ask you about future music. It's nostalgia. This is way more rock.
Hmm.
Talking about the music video, really enjoyed that and kind of the nostalgic lens that it has, the cool shade you have going on. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening here, and it feels like a new phase for you
Yeah.
obviously, and career wise. So talk to me about this new single.
Hmm. So Maggie's World is a song I've been sitting with for a few years, actually. I wrote it in Savannah. I was working for a music festival doing fundraising, and that is the reason that I moved there. And for a variety of reasons, it just wasn't working out. I was not really enjoying um, what I was doing, and I struggled just finding um, wanting to be in Savannah long term, and um, a lot of things kind of opened up in this one little week, and I felt the most inspiration that I'd felt in a long time. And Maggie's World came out in the midst of just feeling overwhelmed with frustration in other parts of my life. So, I was reflecting on childhood memories, and um, I think that change in perspective that I was, you know, um, becoming an adult, and I was reflecting on that shift. So it is another example of coming of age song. Um, but yeah, different than Emerald City. And I think Savannah is a really gritty place. Like, um, I lived about 2 blocks away from this cemetery that is really popular, called Bonaventure. And there's a whole book about this lore of Savannah and the themes of death, and just there are ghost tours and um tons of tons of like dark thematic stuff in Savannah. And I think just being in that environment kind of influenced the grittiness of um the tone that I was exploring that kind of comes through in Maggie's World. But I think it's also just a very freeing song. It's a it's a fun melody, and I think I was just letting go of all of my frustration in a way. Um, so I did sit with it for a little bit, and I recorded it in Athens with some friends. Um, and I it took me a minute to release it just because I wanted to do it right. I wanted to record a music video for it. I wanted to be able to play shows that I could promote around it. And I didn't feel like I could do that until this past summer. So it is really awesome that it is now out in the world, and that I feel like I'm in a good place to be sharing it with people in Atlanta and there's been great feedback. So I think it's kind of like the next step to what I'm working towards.
And speaking of what you're working towards,
Mm.
love to hear as much as you can share about
Yeah.
your current music being made at this moment, maybe this summer or this spring. Tell me about what's inspiring you, how the process is going, and are we gonna get another project? And
Mhm.
I have more. Those are my top three questions.
Yeah. Well, you bet your bottom dollar you're gonna get more music. I have spent the past 2 weekends recording a full-length album, and I cannot believe I'm saying that. But yes, I have been working on music for, I mean, just songwriting is part of my life, and I've accumulated so many songs over the past 3, 4 years. Um, so I've got a pretty significant backlog of stuff, and I've finally um, found resources and just the right place to record 11 of those. And so, um, yeah, that is something that will be coming. I don't know when. I have to figure out some logistics for it, but I'm very, very excited um, about what I've been creating the past few weeks. And it's been a long time coming. So,
The journalist in me has to ask these additional follow-up questions. Do you
okay.
have a title? Or
Yes, I do.
okay, can we share the title?
I think it is okay to share it. It is going to be called Beginner's Luck. And this concept of beginner's luck is something that I've been thinking about ever since reading The Alchemist, um, a pretty popular book, I feel like. Uh, but I was introduced to it by a friend in the fall, even though I'd seen it, around for years. I'd never actually sat down and read it until this spring. And um, The Alchemist talks about the concept of beginner's luck in um, the course of a personal journey and realizing what you want to do with your life, and how once you commit to what you want to do, the world kind of opens doors that make your goals or your dreams more accessible. And I I enjoy um I enjoy all of the songs that are coming from this project because I'm looking back on them with the thought that it's not just beginner's luck that I'm using to write music and to keep pursuing music. I'm trying to step beyond that because after you have the doors open to you, that's when you're challenged and you are forced to really um, claim the hardships and the achievements that come from your goals and the journey towards them. And it's not just talent or um, privilege or any sort of lucky situation that gets you to what you really want to achieve. So that is the idea behind this album.
Amazing. Okay, I can't wait to hear the rest of this. It will Maggie's World be on this project? Okay.
Maggie's World is Maggie's World is
Oh, no.
Maggie's World.
Maggie's World is Maggie's World is Maggie's World. That's
Yeah.
fair. Wow.
Yeah, she is out living a life of her own, and I think that is just so.
Okay. Do we think 2026 or is 2025 still a possibility?
That is yet to be seen. I think 2026 is probably the safer bet. Um, but who knows? We're working on keeping the ball rolling on this project. Um, and we've already come a long way. I've called on two bandmates from Athens that helped me live track the 11 songs over 3 days. I'm working with this guy at a studio in Atlanta who's very efficient and just wonderful. Um, and yeah, I think the team, the three of us, we've put a lot of work in, and yeah, just really looking forward to sharing.
We can't wait to hear it. One more beginner's luck question, then I'll move on.
Mhm.
Is sonically, are we getting something from Mary Margaret that we've never heard before, or is the past couple years of music a hint or a sneak peek at what's to come?
Yeah, I mean, if you've heard me play live shows, being anyone who's listening, if you've seen videos online, you probably have heard some of the stuff that's going to be on this album. Because it is just kind of a collection of work that I've intended to record for a long time. I just haven't been able to yet. But there is a song, like I wrote the title track quite literally 3 days ago. I've been thinking about Beginner's Luck for a long time, but this song um, came out unexpectedly that is is the title track. So um, yeah, there's gonna be some surprises, I think.
Beautiful, beautiful. Oh my God, oh my God. Exclusive, exclusive. That's how I'm gonna title this conversation. The specific questions for you have concluded for this conversation, so I'm going to transition us to the if ever you're listening questions. So these are
Oh,
questions that I ask all of my guests. Um, Thank you for going through all these, and we're gonna, they're still going to be tailored to you a bit because we have to get back into the Catholic school questions.
oh gosh.
I want to know more. So I'm going to try to wrap it into these. For my first one, though, it'll start fun and light. What music are you listening to lately?
Mm, okay, well, I just have to start off with the fact that Madison Cunningham released a new single yesterday, and she has been a long-term inspiration. So I'm really looking forward to hearing her new album coming in October. Um, and I think the reason that I found out about your podcast is because you interviewed Y Bonnie Blair, but I've also just I love going through Y Bonnie's albums and listening to their stuff. So um the new EP that they put out recently, it's very sweet. Um, what else? Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm looking through my recent listening to
Me too.
to answer this question. Pardon the pause here.
What is in your playlist? That's another way
Yeah.
I can ask this question.
Okay. The Folk Bitch Trio I've been listening to. They are an English trio, and they're they put out an album recently that has just incredible harmonies and a folksy kind of foundation, but the tone of their guitar work is got that like indie rock style, and I think that is just incredible the way that they're blending a lot of the same interests that I have in my music, but yeah, they're amazing. I'm enjoying listening to them.
And they're called Folk Bitch Trio.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm listening to that today. That's incredible. The Thank you for sharing those. My next question is about your music. So what is a song or maybe two songs of yours that you believe have been the most underappreciated or underrated in your discography thus far?
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if any of them have been underrated or appreciated, but I will say Georgia, California kind of gets left out of the conversation a lot because I didn't release that as a single on my own. That was a live recording that I was asked to do by this guy named Jesse Mangum, who operates a studio in Athens called The Glow. And for a long time, he has done summer compilation series where he'll invite musicians to come in and he'll record their like a song of theirs live and put it together. So I was asked to be a part of that in 2021. And Georgia to California is a song that I haven't really performed lately, but it is something that I did perform a lot when I first wrote it. And so I'm really glad that there's a recording of it and it is available on the internet to listen to.
It's incredible, guys. As a lot of you listening probably are familiar with Mary Margaret's music, but if you're not, that's honestly one of the places I would start if you want to hear just you with a guitar live, to get like the raw talent that you have. That's a good place to start. The next question is about the music industry more broadly and your take on it.
Hmm.
Um, you could take it wherever you want to go, but the question is, if you could change anything about the music industry as it currently stands, what would it be and why?
Mm. Ooh, I mean, I feel like the most glaring issue is the the streaming platforms that we are dealing with. I mean, I'm sure you've talked to so many artists about this already, and there is constant circulation of news and issue with streaming these days. So I don't want to get into that too much, but I think eliminating streaming and finding other ways to support music on the internet and sharing it on the internet is one thing I would love to change. But I've also been thinking about what it means to be in a music city a lot lately. And I just wish that you didn't have to uh I wish that LA and New York and Nashville were not the only major cities that get recognition for music. I mean, there are so many other markets um, in smaller cities, like you think of Austin as a music city too, and Atlanta is also considered music city. But um, yeah, I think if I could change anything, it would be having more accessible resources for smaller market music cities. And I think that was something that I struggled with in Savannah. Um, as a musician, I couldn't really find a ton of resources to work with for what my interests were. And that is not to say anything negative towards the community that is there now in Savannah. Like, there are tons of musicians working together and building a great scene. But I think, um, there are just there are definitely advantages to being in bigger places, and I wish that instead of so many people flocking to build more empires in these major cities, that people would um, try and branch out and bring talents or organizations or opportunities to smaller cities for music to thrive as well.
I think that's really eloquently stated, Mary Margaret, and I 100% agree. It's funny you use the phrase empire. I wrote a piece earlier this year about how do you create your own music empire for
Mhm.
musicians, especially early stage, because and the examples I was using was people like Prince or Justin Vernon who
Mhm.
created their own ecosystem in Minnesota or Wisconsin. So or even I'm blanking on his name. That's terrible. But in Texas, it's a few artists have done this. Um, but it's too few and far between, as you're saying. So that definitely needs to be talked about more. So great. I think that's a great thing to highlight. Okay, we're going to get back to Catholic school. I couldn't transition that smoothly. I only want to ask one specific question about it, really, as it pertains to your career, because from that upbringing in high school to being in the music industry, which is not Catholic at all, I should say. How has that been for you? Maybe just culturally. How?
Yeah. I will say like I didn't spend my entire youth in Catholic school. I went to private school starting in seventh grade. So more of my formative teenage years, I will say. But yeah, I feel like I had an understanding of what society was like outside of Catholic school as a little kid. But just I think I've done a lot of unlearning from the things that I did learn in Catholic school. Um, I I don't really consider myself Catholic at this point, which is something weird to say on on an interview. But um, yeah, it I think just being in the music scene has opened up a whole new worlds that um, school could not offer.
Um, Second to last question, and we can keep going if you want, but in terms of what I have written down, and this is coming up not like in the moment, how has your relationship with social media? We talked about Substack, but we didn't really talk about like Instagram, TikTok. How has your relationship with it in terms of you promoting your music been since you started to now? Have you decided to use it more, use it less, use it more intentionally? Kind of how has
Yeah.
your relationship with social media been?
Oof. Um, yeah. It ever changing, I think. I struggled for a while to know if I actually wanted to identify myself as a musician on social media. Like you can put that in your bio, and for a long time, I guess I was just wary of that because I was doing a lot of things other than music in my life. And I think at this point, because it has devolved into such an advertising platform, I have finally just kind of given in, and that's the direction that I'm going with it. I am really just trying to use it to promote music. I don't want to really put a ton of personal information on Instagram or social media. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of glad that it's not a place where you're expected to be so personal, um, because of all of the changes that has happened lately with advertising infiltrating, um, because that's not really something that I want to do, to share so many personal things online. Even though a lot of people do use it for that, I think everyone has their own definition of social media, and that is what is commonly understood. So, um, yeah, but I have tried to get into using Reels more on Instagram. I've noticed people are using YouTube Shorts in lieu of TikTok. I don't use TikTok, and maybe that's not to my benefit. But at this point, I'm not like working with a label or anyone that's pushing that down my throat. And so I'm trying to protect my peace with not inundating myself with more chaos online.
Amen. Well, I could definitely say your music brings about peace. It brings about one of the first words I wrote down when I was listening to your music was relaxation. It makes me feel
Oh,
relaxed. But then again, like I said, I started reading the lyrics and I was like, I am not relaxed anymore. This is about death and all these like heavier time breakups and all these really, really good heavier topics. But you ease us into these conversations through kind of the atmospherics of your music, the ways you're using guitars, the instrumentalists, including yourself on these songs. I really want to give that a shout out to during this conversation. I think instrumentally you're really doing something special, and that's why I'm really excited about what happens when you have a full-length project because it's only gonna grow, it's only gonna expand, and you'll obviously you've made the songs, but they'll push themselves
Yep.
artistically. My final question is about advice.
Hmm.
From the time you've started to now, being in Atlanta, then being in Savannah, and doing shows, and then the pandemic hits, and Maggie's World, the new project, the collaborations you've had, who and what has been valuable advice that you've been given that you've really taken to heart since you've started?
Hmm. Wow. I don't know if I have something on the top of my brain that I can point to specifically. I don't know if I can attribute a particular piece of advice to one person. Um, but I feel like the just the different interactions that I've had, and what I've gleaned is just staying as genuine and authentic as possible to people that you interact with in in music in whatever situation, um, is what is guiding all of my most proud endeavors, I guess. Um, I think there is a lot of room to have bullshit engagements and or encounters rather, and just a lot of fluff in the music industry. Um, but I think in my experience, uh, being able to just stay true to my interests and find other genuine people to work with has been the most gratifying. Um, so yeah, I don't that is a really not great or eloquent answer to your question, but
It was. I was gonna paraphrase it to transition into my final question was be your authentic self, be real. I think because what I
yeah,
was gonna
you
initially say was the reason I was interested in talking with you through Instagram for anybody who doesn't know is because you seem really honest and real as an artist. There wasn't a lot of fanfare, there wasn't all these theatrics, and I really like talking to musicians who are real people who make real music and connect. So that lines up, is what I'm trying to say to your advice that you said was not real advice, but directly from one person. But that I think how else you could kind of think of that question is like advice through action or advice through practice that you've picked up, and I think you answered that eloquently. Um, Thank you again for this conversation, Mary Margaret. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Hopefully, once the album's out, we could have you for a part two. I think the listeners would love that. I I want to kind of have you do your own. We talked about social media and promotion, but please tell people where they could find you in the interwebs.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a great conversation as well, on my end. And yeah, if you're interested in listening, if you're ever listening, you can go to any streaming service and find my music under Mary Margaret Cozart. You can follow my website, marymargaretcozart.com. You can follow my Substack, MMC's News and Muses, which is also linked on my website. And I will have more to come.
Thank you again, Mary Margaret. This was awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.